If you're looking to play Lash for the first time, want to get better at Lash, or just want a good build, you've come to the right place. Hi, I'm Sphinx. I'm a Phantom Lash player that has been playing Deadlock since around May. Today I'm going to be breaking down all aspects of Lash you need to know, like his ability usage, builds, items, hero counters, and some general Lash tips and combos. I have this guide divided into chapters, so if you're only here for the builds, feel free to skip ahead. So let's start by talking about how Lash is best used as well as who or how you should play him. Lash is a playmaking and brawling character. He's not going to do the most damage, he doesn't have the most crowd control, and he isn't the tankiest hero. He doesn't really excel at anything besides mobility, but he's kind of above average at everything. Lash is best played in a hit and run, in and out, distraction type playstyle. You don't want to stay in the fight for a long time because your mobility allows you to reposition very easily in fights, but you also don't want to play too far since your strongest abilities are melee range. All of this basically means that the typical Lash playstyle looks something like this: engaging for your team, doing as much damage as possible, backing off while poking, then going back in or chasing stragglers once your cooldowns are back up. This is the typical Lash playstyle, but that doesn't mean any other playstyle is out of the equation. Lash's versatility is the best part about him. Full damage Lash can be played like an assassin, or you can build super tanky and sustain in fights to be basically unkillable. The other important thing to note is Lash's power level. Unlike some characters, Lash is strong at all stages of the game. However, Lash is strongest during the early to mid game, where his damage is almost unmatched. Lash does struggle somewhat during the late game due to opponents having items to counter you, such as Unstoppable or Ethereal Shift. In addition to that, other heroes also start doing just as much damage as you later in the game. This means that snowballing and gaining a lead in the early game is one of the most important things you can do on Lash. Both the builds and combos we talk about today allow you to take full advantage of Lash's early power in order to make sure you start every game on a positive note. Let's start by talking about Lash's abilities. Lash's 1, Ground Strike, is his main damage ability as well as a useful movement ability. It is best used while in the air and does more damage the higher up in the air you are. Some important things to note are that Lash's second upgrade for Ground Strike also knocks up enemies and slows them, as well as the third upgrade giving you significantly improved height and spirit scaling. With a recent update, Lash's Ground Strike will also connect with flying enemies and bring them down with you as you slam. Additionally, Ground Strike can also be used as an escape while high in the air. Next up is Lash's 2, Grapple. It is his main movement ability and possibly the best movement ability in the game. Grapple is used for engaging and positioning yourself in a way that lets you use your other abilities optimally. This ability gets significantly better with more cooldown, additional charges, as well as the 20 extra cast range that the second upgrade gives you. Additionally, Grapple can be used on enemies, allies, minions, monsters, as well as structures. The next ability to talk about is Flog. Flog is a fantastic damage and sustainability for Lash. It is very useful in the laning phase as it deals damage while giving you health back, and it is important to know that Flog gives you health back as a percentage of the damage you do, which means that doing more damage with your Flog also heals you more. Along with this, something a lot of people overlook is that the area that your Flog hits in is also greatly increased with spirit power. Now finally, we have Lash's ult. Death Slam is an extremely strong ultimate that lifts your enemies in the air and then throws them back down to a targeted location. Lash's ult is possibly the hardest part of his kit to use as it requires using the rest of the kit in conjunction. It also has an X and Y range but does not have a Z range, meaning the enemy can move outside of the circular range of the ability, but no matter how much higher or lower they are than Lash, the ability will connect. Due to this, Death Slam works better the higher in the air you are. You should also note that Death Slammed enemies deal area of effect damage, also damaging any enemies they land on. Now that we've talked about Lash's abilities and playstyle, let's look at a few of his basic combos. The main bread and butter Lash combo is to use his grapple to get into the air above the enemy, connect Death Slam on as many people as possible, throw them down, follow up with a Ground Strike, and then use your Flog or shoot for any item proc such as Headhunter. Next up, we have a simple grapple into Ground Strike combo, which is great for early game harass or just to chunk people. These two combos apply to both Lash builds, but for Gun Lash specifically, another great combo you can do is to stay in the air or on high ground and shoot until the opponents are about half HP, and then go in for your Death Slam into Ground Strike combo, as your burst does less damage than the gun build. That covers the basic combos, and although simple, the positioning and decision making needed to pull off great lash plays require time to learn. However, there are even more advanced combos which come in the form of rollouts, corner boosting, delayed ulting, moving around the map efficiently, and more. I will upload these in a separate video that covers these advanced topics. Knowing how his abilities and combos work allow us to create a build that uses Lash's kit as optimally as possible. The first thing to know is that there are two viable Lash builds. The first is called Slam or Spirit Lash, and the second is called Gun or Hybrid Lash. There is a less common melee focused Lash build that we won't be covering in this video. For the builds we covered today, I've made a 2-in-1 Lash build that you can find in-game using the code 163632 or typing in the name Sphinx 2-in-1 Slam or Hybrid Lash. All items are annotated in-game, so you can also just check the build out there if you want to know when to buy which item or what it's for. Additionally, I plan to update this build every time there is an update or if a new meta is discovered. Let's start by talking about how to level with Lash. There are two abilities you can start with, either Ground Strike or Flog. Ground Strike start allows for a cheesy play by using the ability from a high point to enter the lane, usually the middle Citadel building. Flog start is more common and allows for a safer poking playstyle. After that, you usually want to max Ground Strike while also investing some points into getting his first two tiers in the Grapple and Flog. Alternatively, if you prefer to play Lash from range, especially using the gun build, you can max Flog first, which allows for a significant damage increase without getting up close. The only other thing I would recommend is that you get the third tier in Grapple as the very last upgrade, as the fire rate increase when using Grapple isn't that useful, especially for the Slam playstyle. Now, let's get into the build. I'll start by covering the early lane items, which is the same for both builds, and then talk about each variant. First we have Headshot Booster, which is an excellent early poke tool. Then we follow it up with High Velocity Mag, which allows us to secure souls easily as well as giving us a good bonus to weapon damage. After that we have Extra Charge, which is possibly the best 500 gold item for Lash. It provides great movement, enabling Lash to make plays or escape. Then we have some options. If we're healthy, we go for Hollow Point Ward to keep up the pressure on the opponent, Restorative Shot if we're taking a lot of damage, or Monster Rounds if we are roaming and clearing camps. Extra Regen or Healing Right are also good options if we're really struggling in lane. After this, we follow it up with Mystic Burst, which gives us a nice boost to our damage, Extra Stamina to enable even more movement and playmaking, and finally Mystic Shot, which allows us to poke even more and eventually all in the enemy. The last two items I like to buy on Lash but are technically optional in the early lane are Extra Health and Spirit Boots, both of which help our early game playmaking potential and help us snowball, which is very beneficial as a Lash. After that, the build paths diverge based on which build we're going for. I'll cover the pros and cons of each build in a later section, but we'll start by talking about Slam or Spirit Lash. The first item to pick up after the laning items will be Mystic Reach, which will enhance the playmaking potential we have by extending the range of Grapple and Ult. We can easily sell this even before late game if we need the flex slot since it's cheap. Next, Enchanter's Barrier is a great pick for Lash mainly due to his reliance on cooldowns, especially Grapple and Death Slam, which have a base cooldown of 42 and 138 seconds respectively. Then we follow it up with Headhunter. This item can be skipped for the Slam build, however it gives a nice bonus to our burst and is incredibly easy to land the headshot while they are knocked out by Ground Strike. It's also important to note that Headhunter is better the earlier we buy it, since the damage increase on it is flat and does not scale. Then we buy Improved Cooldown for the same reason we buy Enchanter's Barrier. Improved Burst comes after, which is one of the main damage items we can buy on Lash due to its scaling with max health. This means as the game goes on, it'll do more and more damage as people build more health. Surge of Power comes next, which we buy early similarly to Headhunter since it has flat damage, making it better the earlier we buy it. For the Slam build, we will imbue it on Ground Strike, and it also provides us with the Fleetfoot Boots passive and a fire rate increase upon activating it. Next we have Healing Booster, which increases our healing from Flog as well as negating the effects of healing reduction, which means we can delay this item until after the enemy buys healing reduction items if struggling for flex slots. Extra Spirit is next and can once again be delayed if we need slots, since we really only like it for the spirit it provides, which this item doesn't provide a lot of until upgraded. After that comes the first breakpoint where we should buy armor or utility items. At full build, both Lash builds provide a lot of spirit resist. However, that takes time and is expensive, so if the enemy has a lot of spirit damage, this is the first time we should consider buying either spirit armor or bullet armor if they're primarily weapon damage. Purchasing utility items here such as metal skin or healbane are also a good option here. Then we move on to super stamina, which is becoming more of a must buy on Lash due to the stats it provides, as well as the ability to double air jump, double wall jump, and double air dash. Next we buy improved spirit, which gives us a significant amount of spirit, increasing our overall damage output and allowing us to meet the improved burst requirements more easily. Then we buy cold front, which we're buying later than some other builds, however it scales well with spirit, making it a great buy at this stage in the game, and can also be used to clear jungle camps much faster. Rapid Recharge comes next, which is an incredible item especially when learning Lash, as it allows us to have more mobility and provides multiple chances to make plays. After that, we continue upgrading our early game items with superior cooldown, which just gives a significantly reduced cooldown for not just our abilities but also the items. Imbue it on Death Slam because it provides the biggest cooldown reduction there. Next, we get to yet another armor breakpoint as we get into late game. At this point in the game, we have a decent amount of spirit resist even without buying spirit armor, so it is highly recommended to buy improved bullet armor, metal skin, or return fire, unless they are heavy spirit damage, in which case we can just get away with buying regular spirit armor. Then we buy Mystic Reverb, which is kind of a luxury item that does an incredible amount of damage when imbued on Ground Strike. This is because it does 45% of the ability's damage again, and as you know, Ground Strike is one of the highest damaging abilities in the game if used properly. Finally, we continue with Boundless Spirit and Pristine Emblem, which again are great luxury items that give us extra weapon and spirit damage to continue scaling into the late game. Now that we've reached full build, it's important to remind you of a few things. Hollow Point Ward, Extra Health, Sprint Boots, Enchanter's Barrier, and Mystic Reach are all early game items that don't scale super well or aren't necessary in the late game, so feel free to either upgrade or replace them with utility items and armors. We'll talk about which utility items to consider in a later section. Along with this, you should also know that the build costs around 47,150 souls, which is very expensive. In most games, depending on rank, you win or lose when you are at around 40,000 souls, which is why I said the last few items we buy are considered luxury items and not exactly necessary in the build. Now let's move on to hybrid or gun build. As the build uses some of the same items, refer to the slam build or the item annotations in-game if you want an item choice explained. After buying the laning items, we start with quick reload, which gives us a great flat increase in damage, fire rate bonus, and a free reload upon using Flag, which we'll be imbuing in this build. Follow this up with Bullet Resist Shredder, which works even if the enemy has not built bullet resist, as heroes can have negative bullet resist. Then we have Headhunter, Improved Burst, Healing Booster, and Improved Cooldown, which were all explained in the previous section. Warpstone comes next, which is an excellent engage or disengage tool, as well as a good source of bullet armor if we need it. After these items comes the first breakpoint where we should consider buying spirit armor or bullet armor, or utility items. Again, it's important to remember that upon reaching full build, we will have 40% spirit resist even without buying spirit armor, and the 30% bullet resist that comes from using Warpstone. Superior Stamina and Rapid Recharge come next, followed by Pristine Emblem, which is a great item for Gun Lash as it gives us a way to kill tanky opponents, which Lash sometimes struggles with. After that, we have yet another armor or utility breakpoint where it's highly recommended to buy or upgrade our armors, as well as buying any necessary utility items. Finally, we finish the build with some luxury items, including Superior Cooldown, Surge of Power, and Mystic Reverb, which are all imbued on Flog. Like the previous build, remember that a Hollow Point Ward, Sprint Boots, and Extra Health are sellable items if we need flex slots or need to buy armor and utility items. The gun or hybrid build totals out to approximately 40,000 souls, which means it's a bit cheaper than the slam build and allows for scaling much more quickly into the late game, despite having arguably less damage. Now it's time to talk about some of the optional items we can buy on Lash to fill out the extra slots, survive against, or counter specific heroes. First, we have items that are great at countering specific heroes, starting with Healbane, which is generally good against high healing heroes such as Infernus, Abrams, or support builds. Slowing Hex is a great early game item to buy against heroes that like to escape, such as Wraith or Pocket. Silence Glyph has similar use case to Slowing Hex, but does significantly more damage as it scales with Spirit, and also counters hero like Geist or Yamato that have one important ability. Knockdown is great against flying heroes, and Curse is expensive but good against pretty much everyone, but especially carries. Ethereal Shift is a bit niche as it's best used when you don't have escapes available, such as when in Kelvin Dome or Silenced. The next category consists of utility items, including Metal Skin and Return Fire, which are great against heavy weapon damage teams and specifically Haze. Majestic Leap, which has been nerfed but is an optional and fun playmaking tool for Lash. Unstoppable, which is just generally good when you are the carry on your team and therefore being focused with CC. Debuff Reducer and Debuff Remover have unique use cases and can be used to cleanse or reduce status effects such as Pocket Ult, Warden Cage, or even Bebop Bomb. Then we have Enduring Speed, which is great against teams with lots of slows or heroes like McGinnis that build slowing items such as Mystic Slow. Finally, we have Reactive Barrier, which is excellent if being focused with CC when carrying. The final category of optional items include expensive or suboptimal items, which are good in certain cases or when you're just filthy rich. Spiritual Overflow is probably my favorite of these as it gives excellent stats, especially for the gun build. Improved Reach is a great upgrade to Mystic Reach if you like throwing heroes far into your team with ult or using grapple from ludicrous ranges. Crippling Headshot is a fantastic option, especially late game when the enemy team has built a lot of resistances and pairs well with Headhunter. Soul Shredder bullets are an okay option for doing more damage, and the same goes for its upgrade, Spellslinger Headshots. Leech is essentially a more expensive but better version of Healing Booster. However, I sometimes find it unnecessary. Siphon Bullets is an excellent poking item that is useful in long-lasting fights, especially inside the base. And then finally we have Fortitude, which is a highly recommended item if you are learning Lash and find yourself dying a lot despite buying resistances. That covers the optional items for Lash. Remember to build some of these and to build armor. Following the build path exactly without deviating at all means you're not playing the game properly. I'm planning to make an extensive guide talking about how to counter specific heroes and items, so if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments. Now that we've covered both builds, it's important to know the differences between each build and when to build each one. The first thing I'd like to say is that the gun or hybrid build is both easier to play and cheaper. You have more room to build tanky and are able to be effective without getting up close and putting yourself in danger. The Slam or Spirit build is vulnerable to being countered by things such as Dynamo's Phantom Entanglement when slamming, or Haze's Sleep Dagger when ulting. However, despite the downsides, the Slam build is capable of doing significantly more burst damage, as well as being an overall better build for solo carrying. Along with this, the Slam build also requires more soul income and therefore not ideal for newer players, as it's even more reliant on having a good early game. Finally, remember that whether you go Spirit build or Gun build, both your abilities and your gun will do damage, so don't neglect either one. Ultimately, it's your choice as both builds are perfectly viable, so just play what you find fun. Now that we've covered the playstyle, abilities, combos, and builds, you should have all the information to play Lash effectively. Remember, I'm planning to make another Lash guide covering more advanced topics, as well as making other guides for heroes that I play as well. If you have any questions about Lash or my build, leave them in the comments below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. I'll see you guys next time.